Hello, thank you for joining us. Before you begin, please be advised, this podcast is intended for mature audiences and some topics discussed may not be suitable for all ages. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Riordon. With me I have Katie Riordon.
Hello.
Oh, also a host, actually.
I'm a host too.
Guests
I've
are
been
separate.
promoted.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. The purpose of this podcast is to look at news from a little while ago and talk about it for all of you who don't watch the news but are wondering what's going on in the world. So this will be a deep dive, but a dive aimed at people who've never dove before. Can you add anything to that?
Nope. The way you said it was perfect.
Okay, amazing. So let's get right into it. So do you want to start with the heavy stuff or the less heavy stuff? It's all kind of heavy, but we could start with...
This is supposed to be a deep dive.
Okay,
Let's start with the real deal.
It's the real deal. So this is going to be rough. So, Jeffrey Epstein, have you heard of him?
I heard the name Epstein the other day, and I don't remember why or anything about it. So
Okay.
No.
Okay, Jeffrey Epstein is a super rich dude, been rich for a long time. He does like finances, but people don't really know how he makes his money. He's just super rich and owns an island and all this kind of thing. He's friends with like Bill Clinton, Donald Trump. He has a private jet. He like manages finances, ostensibly. Are you paying attention?
Yes, I'm paying attention. Sorry, I'm having my household is having a crisis.
Okay. So Jeffrey Epstein was very rich and unsurprisingly indicted for sex trafficking in 2007-ish. But then he got like a really light sentence, 13 months in prison or something like that, and then they let him out. And recently, he was arrested again in July of this year. So what was that, like 3 months ago? I'm smart. And then he was in prison in New York, I believe. Yeah, they arrested him in like the JFK or something in New York. And then he was in prison awaiting trial and all of that. And he was injured in his cell, mysteriously. And so they put him on suicide watch and all this. But then he was taken off suicide watch. And then later he was found dead in his cell. And yeah, so thoughts on that initially?
What the heck? Okay, how was he injured for one thing, and
Okay.
how was he killed? What's the autopsy say?
Okay, so he was injured. I believe he had injuries like bruises on his neck or something. So they thought
Like he was trying to strangle himself?
Well, yeah, he was being strangled or something.
He's
Death.
alone in the cell, or is he in like a group?
Epstein was found unconscious jail cell with injuries to his neck. This is Wikipedia.
Okay.
Epstein believed he was attacked by his cellmate. Okay. And the correctional staff suspected attempted suicide. So then he was placed on suicide watch. And then 6 days later, he was taken off suicide watch. And then on August 9th, right. So he was supposed to have a cellmate who could keep an eye on him, and then the guards would look into the cell every 30 minutes because they were worried about what would happen. He was taken off suicide watch. His cellmate was transferred. And then the guards were not checking him every 30 minutes the night of August 9th. And they falsified the records to say that they were checking him. And then he was found dead the next morning. So here's the thing. Autopsy. A medical examiner, I believe. Yes, a medical examiner. And medical examiners are legit.
Okay.
Medical examiner found, she ruled that it was a suicide, but the cameras outside his cell were tampered with. There was no usable footage, right? And the guards were not checking in on him, and they falsified the records. And he broke the hyoid bone in his neck, which sometimes happens when people hang themselves, but it's more consistent with strangulation. So there's like a whole, what's the word?
Did they find the conspiracy?
Yes, a conspiracy that
but
he was killed.
Did they find what he hung himself with, or anything like that in the cell?
It's not clear.
Okay. I mean, I guess if the medical examiner ruled suicide, there must have been some kind of evidence.
Well, possibly.
Because if there's like no rope or sheet or whatever,
right,
then there's nothing. So he was alone in the cell that night.
Mm-hmm.
So wait, but the first inmate who he says he was attacked by, and that's how they found the bruises on his neck, or his first roommate, not roommate, cellmate.
Yeah.
Was the one who was supposed to be keeping him from suicide, or that's a different one?
Different one.
Okay, so after he was put on suicide watch, someone more trustworthy was put with him.
Presumably.
Okay. And then that person was removed, so he was alone.
Right.
Okay. And then the cameras were tampered with.
Well, the cameras malfunctioned. The Justice Department is investigating whether they were tampered with.
Okay. Cameras malfunctioned conveniently.
Yes, very conveniently.
Could he see the cameras from inside his cell? Like, is it possible he noticed, like, the lights go off or something? On the security cameras? And was it just the cameras outside his cell, or was it all the security cameras in the whole place?
It said at least one camera in the hallway outside Epstein's cell had footage that was unusable, although other usable footage was recorded in the area. So it was probably the one, like, closest to his cell that was damaged.
So there's no evidence of him going in.
Him going in where?
Not him. Of anyone going into his cell. Basically, there's no footage of anyone going into his cell, and the guards admitted that they were not checking on him every half hour.
The guards are suspected of not checking on him.
Okay. So, I think, probably these are the conspiracies. Either he paid someone to do all this so he could kill himself and not have to stand trial, right?
Maybe.
Or he was murdered for his crimes.
Right. So if he was going to kill himself, they would have had to bribe the guards, you're saying.
Right.
The camera. Right. Yeah. Well,
bribe the guards and pay someone to tamper with the footage, right?
Sure. Although I believe the cameras couldn't look directly into the cell, so it might not have made a difference.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, except that they would want to keep hidden, if possible, that he wasn't being checked on, right?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, so it's crazy. It's a little shady. It's like who... Well, okay, so here's what I think. So he wasn't just hiring prostitutes or abusing girls. He was having girls flown in internationally. So he was kind of in the middle of a whole ring. Some suspect that he was supplying other people with victims. So I'm wondering if someone else who he may have known about, something might have come out in trial that would have indicted someone else. Again, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Kevin Spacey was a friend.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. So possibly like the president.
I mean, that's what would you say? That's an opinion.
It's a setup by the Democrats so that the Republicans don't win the election.
Maybe. Again. It's interesting because I was looking at all these articles and there's no one says that. I kind of came to that conclusion that someone would have killed him because they didn't want him to accuse them of being a counterpart in his schemes.
We get some sausages. You're a molester.
Yes, and our references for this article include Hunt for the Wilder People. Yeah. So, right. And also, if someone who was murdering him had tried to cover it up and pretend it was a suicide, they would have bribed the New York medical examiner.
Oh.
What was her name?
Yeah.
Barbara Sampson. Yes, New York City medical examiner. Oh, incidentally, our sources are Wikipedia, Vox, and Intelligencer. Yeah, so that's pretty crazy. I guess now that I talk it all out, it is kind of still a developing story, but this did happen beginning of August, so I thought there's kind of enough facts at this point that we can talk about it.
That's really interesting. We'll have to come back to this once, like, the investigation and trials and stuff, which I'm sure will have gotten underway, because that's really fascinating.
Right.
Who is left in charge of his estate now? Like, what's happening to his whole
right. So, yes. So, victims are still suing his estate and that sort of thing.
Okay, good.
The Department of Justice and the FBI are investigating. Attorney General Barr said that there were serious irregularities in the prison's handling of Epstein, and so there's going to be some investigations there. Other than that, I'm not sure if they're still pressing charges. Can you convict someone who's dead? I don't know if that really happens.
I think that you would sue his
Oh, okay. So
his money,
the court could
basically,
distribute
like
his estate.
Yeah.
He did also have a will to a couple close friends, so maybe they killed him. Who knows?
That'd be cool.
He had a lot of money, so it would be worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, to a criminal.
Okay. There's like two things that are super interesting, just like more general from this story though. It's really interesting to hear how the justice system is malfunctioned, basically. Just because I hear a lot of talk about it in everyday life, like lots of adults are like, "Oh man, the U.S. justice system is a wreck. This is horrible," you know. Especially our good old Texan Republicans.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't know. I've never heard of a situation like this where there is like actually like maltreatment happening in the prisons and everything, and that's important. And I think I'm a little disappointed that this case is what is going to bring it to the forefront, because no one's going to have any sympathy for him.
That's true.
You know, because he's a really horrible person, and that's really sad. Because I think that is something that needs to be looked into and fixed.
That is a big problem.
Right. That's serious human dignity.
Right.
Issues.
Definitely.
And that's kind of anti-constitutional, I want to say. At least goes against
cruel and unusual, maybe.
Yeah, what the Constitution was based on, like
sure, ideals.
Yeah.
The other problem, so that is big. Like, there's not enough supervision in prison, and there's not enough regard for the prisoner's safety. Right. The other thing is he was arrested and indicted and convicted in 2007 for sex trafficking, and they only gave him 13 months. And because his attorneys worked out a deal with the Florida, I believe, courts. Let's check that. Where he just got 13 months, and some of it was like house arrest, and he should have been in jail for life. And none of his, subsequent crimes would have ever happened if they had just convicted him right the first time. Which is very unfortunate. Yeah, that was the other thing I wanted to say is, like, I don't really know how this all works, but how come his victims? Yeah, his victims, now that he's dead, they're suing him. But why wasn't this brought up before if it was such a huge business? Like, how did no one know this was happening? Well, how did not just actually, he's been sued many times. 2008, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. So he's been sued many times. They were all settled, obviously, or some of them were dropped. So is it basically he has enough money that he was able to... That's the impression I get, which is very interesting. What's the point of the justice system if you can just pay and keep being a sex offender? So here's the thing. When it's a lawsuit, you only have to satisfy the plaintiff. If he pays $20 million, let's say, to whoever's suing him, and they're okay with that, then in the eyes of the law, I think everyone's happy, right? Okay. Or at least everyone's satisfied. Okay. He should have been imprisoned for life when they brought criminal charges, because then the law needs to be satisfied. And it was actually illegal for them to give him the deal that they did. But again, it was probably his money. So in the civil cases, I think it's okay if you have a lot of money and, in a sense, get out of it because you're still paying the victim something in the settlement. But in the criminal cases, it definitely should be, everyone should be equal. Okay. We all know that. So is the judge of his case originally the jury? Like, how does that happen? Are they being put on trial, also investigated? Or were they? I mean, I feel like he would have had to go back to prison for life. Right. So he looks like such a nice old man. Alas, it's not clear. I'm guessing investigations are ongoing. But again, this is again opinion or conjecture. If someone managed to murder him when he was in federal prison, they, I'm sure, could have managed to bribe the judge and shut down the investigation of the judge, etc., etc. Yeah. Well, now I feel really safe. Yes, indeed. Yeah, so that's Jeffrey Epstein. Wow, that's a good piece of news. Recently deceased. Yeah, I really wanted to talk about this because I kept hearing about it, and I heard that he died, but I didn't know what was going on. And it's a big conspiracy. Where did he get his money? Do you know? It's kind of mysterious. So he would manage other people's money, but this Vox article has a quote where someone says most rich people work 26 hours a day, and Epstein played 26 hours a day. So he doesn't have a $1 billion company or whatever. No, he would.
Most rich people in the United States, you know what their company is.
Right. No, so he would consult for other rich people and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And manage other people's finances. But it's not clear. He was involved. Actually, he had worked for a Ponzi scheme, but he had left before it was discovered. But people are like, did he make any money from that? No one really knows. And that sort of thing. He's a mysterious figure. He was a mysterious figure before he mysteriously died. So, yeah, crazy.
Weird.
Crazy stuff. Any last thoughts? Questions on Epstein?
No, I think we've covered it now.
Yeah,
Better
all
move
right.
on.
Well, let's take a break now for a word from our sponsors. You all know that WordPress and Squarespace and what's the other one? Wix are where you go to set up a website. But what if you don't want to set up a website? You just want to read someone else's website. Well, I have the perfect website for you to check out. votejophus.home.blog is online now with hilarious, freshman-friendly entertainment. It's, in fact, a multimedia entertainment conglomerate. If I may use the word. So definitely check out votejophus.home.blog. No website setup required. You don't even have to go to Squarespace or Wix. There's just a website out there on the internet ready for you to look at. So definitely check that out. And back to the show. Okay, our next news, unless you want to talk about what you're reading. That might be a little more lighthearted.
Well, not sure about lighthearted, but I love to talk about what I'm reading. I am currently reading a play by Harold Pinter called Betrayal. I haven't finished the play.
Okay.
We'll probably talk about this in a couple weeks when I finished it.
Yeah,
but it is on Broadway. Really amazing production starring Tom Hiddleston.
Very cool. This show is brought to you by Broadway. Is Broadway a company or?
No.
Okay, it's just the theaters that are on Broadway.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember which theater it's in though. No, it's in the Jacob B. Brendan, or the Jacob B. Brendan B. Jacobs, something like that theater on Broadway.
Okay.
The show is brought to you by a theater on Broadway.
A theater on Broadway,
There's definitely a Jacobs in the title.
Not sponsored. This show is not sponsored. If you are the owner of a company that makes money and would like to sponsor this show, please reach out.
Yes.
Leave a comment on votejophus.home.blog. So, let's move on. Do you want to talk about Brazil or Brazil?
I think we better start with Brazil.
Okay. Let's start with the Amazonian Synod because this is, after all,
Oh man, going out of order here.
Yeah,
all right.
Well, oh gosh.
Okay. Amazonian Synod.
Yeah, okay. So, a synod, for all of you laymen out there. Or Gentiles, no. Pagans out there.
Oh.
A synod is when bishops all go to the Vatican and have a meeting with the Pope. I think they're going to the Vatican. I don't know. They can probably have the meeting wherever they want. So the bishops from the Amazon are having a synod with Pope Francis, and the synod hasn't happened yet. It's planned, but they released a document previously. They released a document.
What does it mean, the bishops from the Amazon? Like, what countries does that cover?
It's a region. The Pan-Amazon Synod. That's just what it's called.
Okay.
Meeting of bishops.
Interesting.
So probably Brazil and surrounding countries.
Right. I'm assuming whatever countries the Amazon runs through.
Yes, I would assume. Okay, so it's scheduled for October 6th to 17th, but they released a preparatory document called Instrumentum Laboris on June 17th. So people had read this and commented. And Cardinal Burke, who's an American, Cardinal Burke says the document is apostasy because the document has too much to do with topics that are outside the church's concern, which is very interesting. They're not concerned with the deposit of faith, which is what synods are, I guess, supposed to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest problem is they're discussing new ecclesial ministries for women deacons, essentially, and the priestly ordination of possibly married people. So
possibly married people? Or the possible ordination
of married people.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's go here. Okay, and our sources for this are cnsnews.com. What does CNS stand?
Catholic News Service.
Okay, that's what I figured. Also, CNA, Catholic News Agency, which is very confusing.
Wait, maybe I'm wrong about CNS. I'm doubting myself now.
Who knows? And also Crooks.
Crooks.
So I don't know if these are like good sources, but
this show's brought to you by Crooks.
Google found. Okay, so I believe there was like a concise list down here somewhere. Here we go. Yes, so
this is cnsnews.com, by the way, in case you want to go look at the concise list for yourself.
Yeah. Link in the description. So, the objectives of the synod are fostering an appreciation for lay ministries. That seems good.
Great.
allowing women deacons. I don't know if that's a thing.
Nope, not a thing.
Okay, not a thing. Finding alternative rituals for the Eucharist. That seems bad.
Very bad.
Establishing a new model of priesthood not reserved for men. That seems very bad.
Oh, gosh.
Promoting an enculturation of the sacraments. Reinterpreting them from an indigenous perspective. So, let's come back to that. Reinvigorating the grassroots basic Christian communities. I don't know what that means. Liberation theology. Are you familiar with the term? People always say that.
No.
Okay. Rejecting industrial development of the Amazon region and internationalizing the Amazon. I don't know what. Well, rejecting industrial development seems fine. But anyways, here's the thing. So, women priests, married priests, not amazing. Okay, women priests definitely bad. We can probably all agree on that, right? Married priests are allowed in many parts of the church.
Right.
So, that's not the end of the world, I don't think. Although, it's tradition for the Western church. Like, if we allow it in the Amazon, where else is it going to be next? You know what I mean?
Right. Priests and bishops used to be married in the early church, in the Western church. I don't remember when that changed. And it's not really canon law, is it?
It's not doctrine, it's convention.
Right. Okay. So they're saying anyone who is married can now also become a priest.
It's unclear because the synod has yet to happen. But the document, I think, these cardinals, another cardinal, Brand Müller from Germany, was also very concerned about this. And alternative rituals for the Eucharist sound bad, and reinterpreting the sacraments from an indigenous perspective, sounds bad. But, okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second. I believe when you have a universal church and a Catholic church that is supposed to include all these different cultures, you can, to a certain extent, change things like rites and rituals to mesh more firmly with the various cultures. For example, the Byzantine Rite and the...
But we have, like, charismatic Catholics.
Sure, well, those are still in the Roman Rite, but more like Anglican Ordinariate.
Okay.
Those masses are very, very different.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it could go in either direction. And if you have cardinals and a pope who are more inclined to change the essence of the sacraments, that could go very badly. If you have cardinals and a pope who are more inclined to just change the rites and the kind of accidents, well, you can't actually change the accidents of the sacraments, but just change the rites and the presentation of the sacraments, I think that could be good.
It could. Are these cardinals, the Amazonian cardinals, worried that they are having problems, like the people are having problems relating or understanding the Catholic faith?
That's a possibility, right? Because I think that's...
Why do they want to make all these changes?
I think that's usually the concern, that when you come in and evangelize and change the entire culture, your evangelization is going to be met with hostility, and that's totally understandable. But if you can somehow meld the doctrine and the culture, that would be ideal.
Is the Catholic Church? It's not. It was they were colonized by the Spanish, right? So the Catholic faith is not new in South America.
That's very true.
I mean, new as in the United States is new, but it's been there for a few hundred years.
Yes, although I think if anywhere in the world there are people who have no contact with Western civilization or the church, it would probably be in the Amazon.
Really? It's that
there
rural?
Are a few, like maybe a few hundred people, I think, who still live totally out of contact with civilization as we know it. And Dr. Peterson would argue that they have a civilization of a sort, but
they don't have like technology, or anything.
Modern technology, certainly.
Right. Interesting. Are they?
And it's becoming very rare, but I think that sort of thing is more accepted there.
So why then are the bishops fighting against industrialization? If they're having problems bringing people into the church, why would they want to fight against industrialization, which will open up their people to see the Catholic Church in the rest of the world and be more open to it and feel
really
like
interesting.
a more part of the whole and know more what it's. They would have better chance for education.
That's a really good point. Industrialization would connect all of these people more efficiently. I think industrialization in the Amazon is definitely bad, like off the table in a sense. So you can't push the industrialization, so you have to push the other way.
Got it. Because you're saying we need like the natural ecosystems that are left there. The world needs them for survival. That is probably the case.
I definitely think that's what the bishops and especially Pope Francis want also. He's big on the environment, which is definitely a good thing. Let's see. I feel like there was a quote here about why they wanted... they will discuss the ordination of elderly people preferably indigenous, to guarantee that the remote communities in the region have access to the sacraments. Yes, so they need a lot of priests to cover this vast area. And so they ordain more freely, or they want to.
Okay.
And again, celibacy is not a doctrine, and it seems like they have an extreme situation. But on the other hand, these prominent cardinals are very concerned.
Right, because changing the tradition there could lead to changing the tradition worldwide, because
right, that's very true.
The universal church.
This says Pope Francis is clear that priestly celibacy is not up for grabs. That's crooksnow.com.
What does that mean? Priestly celibacy is not up for grabs.
Oh, it's a discipline, sorry, not a convention. It's a discipline, not a doctrine. I think Pope Francis doesn't want to allow married priests.
Okay.
According to this article.
Well, that's great. Yay, Pope Francis.
Yeah.
Is the reason that they want to ordain women the same reason that they have a shortage of priests and they think that that's a good way to spread this? That's the only way to spread the sacrament, or is there a different reason? Because I know like ordination of women is coming up in the United States just because of the crazy feminist people.
Right. It says the 3 language versions of the document speak of people and not men. It is referring to the ordination of what are known as the viri probati, married men of proven virtue, many of whom already serve as permanent deacons. So I think it's possible that when the other article mentioned ordaining women, that's coming from seeing people, viri translated as people, and viri really means men.
Okay. That's, man. The Catholic Church has more problems over translation issues.
Goodness.
Like we have,
seriously.
Isn't the Great Schism just a translation problem?
Yes.
And oh my gosh, if that happens again over women priests, that'd be so ridiculous. I feel like
it would.
We have like Google. We should be able to translate and communicate with each other.
Google Translate's not that good, but yeah, definitely.
It's really funny. Also, back to the Tower of Babel. God's like, haha, you all have to deal with different languages. And he's like, okay, Jesus, go form a church, and they'll all be universally united and everything. And now he's like, dang it.
Jesus is like, say psych right now. Oh, goodness.
Oh, gosh.
Wow, it all goes back to the beginning. This is about old news, isn't it?
It really is.
We need a new name, though. Drop a comment if you have a good idea for a name for this podcast, because Old News Podcast is already a thing.
What's our mission statement? Our listeners need some background.
A mission statement? Oh my gosh.
Oh, just make it up off the top of your head.
Okay, our mission is to provide you with home ground, hand spun, Ohio fried.
Why Ohio? We have zero connections to Ohio, except we drive through it a lot.
It's a song by Jake Paul, but anyways. I don't know why that popped into my head all of a sudden. No, our mission is to bring you a deep dive into current, except slightly old, news topics, to give you the best information possible, and also to have entertaining guests so that you can learn in an entertaining environment. I love John Oliver because it's educational and it's entertaining. Shout out to John Oliver. If you want to be a guest on the show, we'd be happy to have you.
Also, if you have money and you'd like to sponsor us,
yeah, true.
we would be happy to
He works
take your
for
money.
HBO now. They have a lot of money.
Yeah. What if we called ourselves, like, Hidden Gold?
Hidden Gold? That's a little too
Because we're
vague.
#golden.
Legit golden.
Legit golden.
What if we called ourselves Verily of the Sheen of the Metals Argent?
Definitely not. What if we called ourselves... I was going to quote the first line of the Iliad and then my mind blanked. So
the first line of Arms and the Hero? No, that's the Odyssey. Or the Indian? Which one is that? Arms and the Hero. I think that's the Odyssey.
That's of Achilles' wrath.
The Wrath of Achilles is
the
Iliad.
Like
yeah.
That.
Sing Muse of the Wrath of Achilles and its devastation. Yeah, Dr. Davis had us read that like 10 times.
Good. It's very important. You learn everything about what the epic's about from the first line.
That's true. I quoted it in my paper.
Look at you go.
I think. I don't know.
Coming. That A is running towards you down the track.
I certainly hope so. My goodness. Okay. Yeah. All right. What else do we have to talk about? Do you want to keep going? I feel like that was a pretty good conversation right there.
That was good. I feel like we've exhausted the possibilities.
It was 39 minutes. That's perfect.
Okay. Great.
And then we have more to talk about next time. Oh, the Brazilian fire. I didn't really want to talk about that anyway.
Okay. What's the other one?
The Amazon is on fire. Architecture. Oh, yeah. The architecture in the church this morning. I had questions about that. But we can, unless you want to talk about that right now.
Yeah. Let's have a quick architectural discussion.
All right. So we were in this church this morning, Cistercian, just across the street from UD. Yeah. Shout out to
Irving,
Cistercian
Texas.
Abbey. If you want to sponsor. Okay.
We should bring Father Thomas or somebody on.
Then we should bring really both cool. Father Thomases at the same time. That would be even more confusing than it already is.
They're so funny. Talking to each other is great. We should do that.
Yeah. So we were in the church this morning, and I was looking around, and the walls are made almost entirely out of these very rough stone blocks. It looks pretty cool. But then supporting these walls are super smooth concrete columns, right? So it clearly wasn't made a long time ago. Like my first thought was that it was made a super long time ago, and so that was like the best technology they could figure out. My goodness, someone's calling me. Okay, but obviously since the rough-hewn stone blocks are on top of the smooth concrete, it was built recently and was just made to look rough intentionally. So my thought was, when you're in a church and you're trying to dedicate the best of craftsmanship to God and all that sort of thing, it's appropriate to use like rough blocks that were obviously intentionally made rough. Like, shouldn't you kind of smooth it out, make it all perfect and beautiful?
I think there is danger in thinking that, because actually all of humanity, basically, the more I study the arts, I'm learning that
the arts,
human beings, yes, I'm a drama major with a sculpture concentration.
The arts with capital A.
The arts.
Just for those of you following along at home, that's arts with a capital A.
Humanity, basically, we have this idea, at least in contemporary culture, that our idea of beauty is perfection. And that's not true, because you look at the natural world and there's nothing like a blade of grass or a tree bark or something like that is not like a perfect straight line, and it's not a bunch of perfect straight lines in a row. And you look at a tree, someone draws a tree, and if you draw a tree super like messed up and not straight and perfect and proportional, it looks weird. But if you look in the real world, there are no proportional trees. Like, they all look weird if you really pay attention. And so I think that we have to remember that beauty isn't perfection. Like the human being, in and of ourselves, we're imperfect because of the fall. And since then, we've always been imperfect, but that doesn't take away our beauty as creations of God. So I think there's danger in thinking that. Now, the whole like smooth cement versus rough limestone, that's a whole nother discussion.
That's an architectural discussion that we're not qualified to have.
Right.
Patrick, we should have Patrick as a guest on the show.
We should. That'd be great.
That would be fun.
Maybe when he comes in May for graduation.
Oh, no way.
We can have him look at the church.
Special graduation guest.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll circle back to this topic. But very interesting. Drop a comment if you liked the Cistercian church or didn't like it.
Yes.
Or if you think they should sponsor us.
Or if you would like to talk to us about it. Or if you know about why they built it that way.
Yes.
Or if you want to talk philosophy and the human person and perfection and dignity.
Or just drop a comment if you want to talk about anything or sponsor anything.
Especially drop a comment if you want to sponsor something. Remember, that's votejophus.home.blog.
That's right. Yeah, so this podcast will probably be coming to you on YouTube, and I know that's a big bummer. But I'll try to get on Spotify. You can get on Spotify and Apple Music and SoundCloud and all those things. So
okay.
I'll try and expand my base.
All right.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
I don't know if I have time right now. YouTube is easy.
We do go to one of the
most difficult colleges in the country.
Difficult, critically acclaimed colleges.
No, that's what Joey said about Hillsdale.
Yes, I know.
Okay. Someone this morning said that Hillsdale is our only competitor, so we're probably pretty difficult.
Educationally, Hillsdale is our only competitor?
Someone standing behind me in line said that. He was like an old professor type guy, so he probably knows what he's talking about.
I know they're a good school, but there's like St. John's College?
I don't know.
I've always thought that was a pretty difficult liberal arts style.
Who knows?
No
source on that one, so it's not verified.
It's all subjective.
That's true.
It doesn't matter. We just have to be good people and get a good education. Get the most we can out of it.
Nice. On that note,
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks for coming to the podcast.
The nameless
Name
podcast.
TBD.
Yes. Podcast.
The slightly older news. Hold on, let's find out.
Slightly old news.
Let's find synonyms for old.
All right, synonyms for old.
Elderly, mature, aged, advanced in years.
Grizzled.
Hoary news.
Gray.
Aged, decrepit. Doddery news. Formerly, bygone, former, old and remote, previous, remote news.
No.
What's the synonym for news?
New cinnamon.
New Cinnamon. That's the name of our podcast. New Cinnamon only.
New
article.
Cinnamon.
Press release. It's going to be a senile communication. It's going to be
senile communications by two young people.
Venerable scoop.
A venerable scoop.
Yes.
That's actually not a bad name. It doesn't fit our podcast, but that's a good name
Venerable
for something.
scoop.
It would have to be like.
It would be like
about people who are almost blessed.
It would.
Or by bishops or something.
It would have to be about heritage ice cream recipes handed down from monasteries.
You're right. Venerable scoop.
Venerable scoop. All right.
So if you've got anything more pertinent.
Ice cream shop idea. Venerable scoop.
Maybe someday when our podcast has been sponsored by enough people that we have money, we could open an ice cream shop.
We could open an ice cream shop. Just sitting there and talk about oldness.
UD doesn't have an ice cream bar. We
true.
only have a coffee shop. We could use a soda fountain.
Yeah, we could. Where would we put it?
I don't know. We could build a new building.
The courtyard of Clark.
It could be, everyone thinks there's going to be a new auditorium, so we put a big foyer on it and then have, like, concessions, and one of them is, like, vintage ice cream.
Yeah, that would be cute. We could have, like, a neon lights outside the auditorium and everything. Make it a whole small town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Texas theater vibe.
Yeah. I don't know what Texas theaters are like.
The Texas theater. The Texas theater is an old movie theater downtown Fort Worth, which is, it's been around for, like, ever. And basically, it was in the bad area, and, like, there were holdups there and all kinds of crazy stuff. We'll have to look up we could look up the history. That would be a fun thing to talk about.
History.
Anyway, it's got the old original, like, 1950s neon Texas theater sign.
Nice.
And now it's been revamped by hipsters, and they show obscure movies there. I went there to see Tampopo, which is like a weird indie Japanese film.
Tampopo.
Apparently, I'm a really cool person now that I've seen this film, but it was so weird. It was hilarious, but also the most uncomfortable thing I've ever watched at the same time. It's like weird Japanese humor.
Okay.
But also really funny. I don't know.
Yeah. Huh.
For those of you who know what I'm talking about, shout out to hipsters and Tampopo.
And the Texas theater.
Not family-friendly viewing.
That is not freshman-friendly.
Not freshman-friendly. Possibly not anyone-friendly. But there we go.
That's unfortunate. All right. Well, on that note, signing off.
Goodbye.